Hello and welcome to Telesur. This is from the south, from our studios in Caracas, Venezuela. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Let's begin with our stories. We start in Brazil, where landslides have killed at least 15 people in Rio de Janeiro. After days of heavy rains, a stone fell from a hillside in the district of Piratininga, hitting a group of houses during the night. According to the local fire service, 4 people are still missing. 11 have been rescued so far with the help of rescue dogs. Close to 200 emergency personnel are working in the area with the help of volunteers.
This is not a surprise tragedy because the civil defense goes up the hill and says that it is forbidden to live there, but they do not set up a house, do not create a project, nor give anyone a shelter somewhere else. Where will the poor live?
We continue in Brazil. One of the main proposals of the president-elect Jair Bolsonaro is to make it easier for Brazilians to carry weapons. Many experts say this will not stop violence and crime in the country.
Most of the victims of violence in Brazil are young black people from poor families, often living in the favelas of the big cities. Nearly 64,000 people were murdered in 2017. That's an average of 175 homicides per day.
20,000 of the victims are young black people, and you can see that often this kind of lethal violence is caused by the presence of weapons and by a police force that doesn't prevent but only punishes.
During his campaign for October's election, the president-elect Jair Bolsonaro promised to give people freer access to guns, reduce the age of criminal responsibility to 16, and allow the security forces to use more aggressive tactics against the criminals.
People do not trust the police because the police already go in and do what they want, and there is no one to answer for it. You cannot complain, and the state is not, in fact, seen to be providing security. We believe this measure will only make the situation worse. We also see it as an economic measure. Bolsonaro has promised this not to provide security for the people, but to benefit the arms industry.
Disputes between rival gangs, the economic recession, and cuts in the budgets for public security have all contributed to the increase in crime. More than 10,000 murders of women, just on gender grounds, are currently being investigated by the police.
We had a campaign all this year called Stop Killing Us, Stop Killing Women Indiscriminately. When a woman is killed, there are also children left behind. Almost all women killed this year had small children who are also victims of that violence. It is quite a critical situation, a reality that we have to work to change, and we won't change it with more weapons and more violence.
Figures show that more than 5,000 people died last year at the hands of the police. Experts say that an ever higher proportion of violence is a direct consequence of actions that are meant to stop it.
A key issue for Brazil. Now we go to Mexico. A small group from the first migrant caravan has already reached Tijuana on the U.S. border, but the bulk of the caravan is still on its way to Guadalajara. Our correspondent in Irapuato, Pablo Perez, has more from over there.
Well, today we're right here at the outskirts of Irapuato city in the state of Guanajuato, Mexico. And right now we're seeing how all these migrants, they are members of the first migrant caravan, are trying to board freight trailers to go all the way to Guadalajara, Jalisco, which is the next stop scheduled for this caravan. Right now we can see that very common image of the migrants riding the train that they name the Beast. It's no longer the most usual way to travel for them. They are trying to get a ride from the freight drivers, and well, this is something really different because there is some willingness to do that. It has to be. There is the police officers. They are asking every driver if they are taking the migrants by their own will, of they are getting paid, or because getting paid for that will be considered a misdemeanor. But if the driver says, no, I'm giving them a ride from my own goodwill, they cannot stop him. So this is another way for them to get faster to the border. And let's remember that we have already covered over 700 miles, but we have 1,500 on our way to go to Tijuana. That's the border with San Diego, California, which is the entry point. Most of these migrants will consider their destiny. And well, we will go on informing you, and we'll go back to the study.
That was Pablo Perez from Mexico. And the journey to the U.S. has proved to be even more difficult for the members of the LGBTI community. Many have reportedly faced hostility from local residents after reaching the city of Tijuana. They arrived at the local bus station to reach a shelter that was provided by a donor. Before they could even get through the door, they were met with opposition from neighbors who disapproved their presence.
We're surprised, impacted, we're uncomfortable because the authorities didn't consider us. There is a municipal president here, a delegation that should have told us. Neighbors were asking for your support, your collaboration. People are going to come.
And as the main caravan continues its journey, a separate group is quickly approaching Mexico City from the southern state of Veracruz. Several groups of migrants have joined to travel through this state on Mexico's Gulf Coast. Some walked down the highway while others jumped onto the back of a truck to catch a ride. U.S. President Donald Trump said he will not allow asylum for anyone who crosses into the country illegally.
We're looking for help to get rides on trailers or something like that, to leave the state of Veracruz. Sometimes rumors come up of someone going missing of one thing or another. We prefer to arrive in Puebla and keep advancing from there. Wherever we are, we advance north as much as we can.
Coming up, we have more stories. Meanwhile, you can follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and my account at Carla G. Telesur. We'll be back after this video.
Contra el fascismo, un solo frente, una sola unión, hombro con hombro, unidos todos hasta acabar con el enemigo. Abajo los generales mafiosos, abajo los elementos contrarrevolucionarios. ¡Viva el nacional!
Welcome back. A new cause has been opened against Peru's former president Alberto Fujimori related to forced sterilizations. Prosecutor Marcela Gutierrez accuses Fujimori and 3 of his former ministers to be aware of the practice that took place during his term. According to Peru's Ombudsman's office, nearly 300,000 surgeries for tubal ligations were performed between 1996 and 2001. Over 2,000 women have reported being sterilized without their consent or proper information on the procedure. Now to Mexico. In the last 10 years, around 1,978 clandestine graves have been found in Mexico. According to the prosecutor's office, around 2,884 bodies were recovered in those graves after the investigation. Journalists revealed that the mention of the clandestine graves as the fate of many disappeared were already written. The investigation into new graves arises every day.
We don't know what happened to them. The Attorney General's office tells us a quantity, but in the news was another. We don't have a rule of law.
It is painful to recognize that the same state is the one that disappears our children.
Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel arrived to the United Kingdom on Monday as a stop on his way back to Cuba. Let's take a look.
The Cuban president's tour started early in the month. Miguel Díaz-Canel visited Russia, the Democratic Republic of Korea, China, Vietnam, and Laos. His tour is particularly timely as the right wing in Latin America is making waves and Cuba's relations with the United States are fraying.
This tour has been very balanced. It has upheld its foreign policy objectives and has strengthened ties with countries that are of utmost importance on the international stage and remain friends of the island.
Miguel Díaz-Canel was received by the premiers of each country, including Russian President Vladimir Putin, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, and his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping.
It's important the new Cuban president formed close connections with the highest leaders of these countries. He has to prove that Cuba is not alone and has friends across the world.
In every country he visited, he explored opportunities for greater cooperation in business and managed to achieve agreements to this effect. For instance, Russia has agreed to invest in the technological sector of Cuba, and in return there will be investment opportunities for entrepreneurs and the government.
These are strategic relations. Trade with Russia reaches nearly $300 million, which doesn't reach the levels of trade with China that surpass $1 billion. But it's still an important source of investment in transportation, in energy production, and in railway infrastructure. Another topic that was discussed in Russia is cooperation in military matters. Díaz-Canel even mentioned the possibility of exporting Cuban products to China, which has the largest market in the world.
This tour has proven to the world, and particularly the United States, that Cuba is far from isolated, and despite the 60-year blockade, it's business as usual.
A review of the trip of Cuban president to different countries. Trinidad and Tobago endured a 3.9 magnitude earthquake on Sunday night, the latest in a series to hit the island. It was also felt in neighboring Grenada. No injuries or damages were reported. A warning was issued earlier this month about moderate to strong earthquakes following a 6.9 quake that struck the islands in August. The general strike in Costa Rica against the tax reform by the government of Carlos Alvarado Quesada has entered its 10th week. Teachers' unions ratified the legality of this strike and presented a complaint to the International Labour Organization. On Friday, the education sector presented a complaint against the government condemning violations of trade union freedom. Let's hear from our correspondent in San Jose, Fernando Francia.
It's been 2 months since the indefinite general strike started. Recently, more than 8,000 education workers and government employees joined the strike. A large part of the debate about the strike has been its legality, with different courts upholding its legality since it started back in September 10th. This has seen a huge support to the labor sector against the tax reform, which is being debated right now in the Constitutional Court. This court has to decide if the reform is unconstitutional or not. If they approve it, it will then move to the Legislative Assembly as a final step before being approved. Still, discussions about other ways to overcome the tax deficit in Costa Rica continue.
Fernando Francia from San Jose. The lower house in Chile is set to debate a controversial education bill this week. This bill aims to punish teachers and students who use abusive language in educational institutions. It gives school principals the power to expel students immediately if they are heard using such language. The government is confident that the bill will be approved. We'll take one last short break, but stay with us. And we're back. A human rights organization has withdrawn its most prestigious human rights prize from Myanmar's state councillor Aung San Suu Kyi. In a statement, it has accused her of perpetuating human rights abuses by not speaking out against violence against the Rohingya Muslims. Once seen as a champion in the fight for democracy, Suu Kyi has been stripped of a series of international honors over her actions during the crisis. Now, meanwhile, thousands of Rohingya Muslims are fleeing refugee camps in Bangladesh. That's the pictures that we're seeing before, being afraid of being repatriated to Myanmar. Authorities are reportedly launching a repatriation process to Rohingyas that starts on Thursday. Now we go to Israel. Israeli forces have killed 7 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip during airstrikes and an undercover raid, which Hamas said targeted one of its commanders. The violence prompted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to cut short his visit to Paris, where he was attending a World War I commemoration. In a statement, Hamas said gunmen drove past in a car and opened fire on a group of its armed men, killing one of its commanders. A second officer was wounded. The Israeli incursion and air attacks also drew rocket fires from the Hamas-controlled enclave. The military said its defenses intercepted 2 of these launches. The president of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, has vowed to never allow Gaza to be separated and isolated from the rest of Palestine. In a televised address to the nation, Abbas said unity was the strongest weapon that the people of Palestine have in the face of aggression by forces against the Palestinian statehood.
Our national unity is the most precious thing we have, and it is our strongest weapon to face the plans for liquidation and conspiracies that are being waged against our national cause. The attempts to separate Gaza from the homeland will not succeed.
Storm Gaja continues to threaten the Bay of Bengal in India. The storm may impact the southern part of the country later this week. Gaja will also bring widespread rain, thunder showers, high winds, and rough seas off Myanmar's coast. The emblematic Stan Lee, the creator of iconic fictional heroes such as Spider-Man, Iron Man, Thor, Black Panther, Captain America, Black Widow, Fantastic Four, and the Hulk, has passed away at the age of 95 in Los Angeles. As a writer and editor at Marvel Comics, Lee was key to the growth of the company into a comic book titan in the 1960s. He was widely credited with adding a new layer of complexity and humanity to superheroes. Lee's legacy extended the film, art industry, where movies starring nearly all of its major creations have crossed over $20 billion in theaters worldwide. Dozens of cat mummies and a rare collection of mummified beetles have been unearthed in 7 ancient Egyptian tombs south of Cairo. A team of archaeologists made the find while excavating a 4,500-year-old tomb. Also in the tomb were 100 wooden cat statues, as well as a bronze statue of Bastet, the goddess of cats. The tomb is thought to date back to the 5th dynasty of the Old Kingdom. not long after the Great Pyramid of Giza was built. A dozen endangered African penguins have a second chance at life thanks to a group of dedicated conservationists in the city of Cape Town, South Africa. The animals were recently released into the ocean. Many were in pretty bad shape when they first arrived at the NGO-run rehabilitation facility. Some were abandoned as little chicks. African penguins have been nearing extinction since industrial fishing started around Cape Town. Only 25,000 remain today, compared to over 1 million that dotted the coastline a century ago. And that brings us to the end of this news brief, but this and many other stories, as you know, you can find on our website at telesurenglish.net. And be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. I'm Carla Gonzalez. Continue watching Telesur, connecting the Global South. Until next time.